Some voices never truly fall silent. Even when taken, their echo remains. In this episode, we revisit the dark moment that ended the life of a symbol of music and peace on a New York sidewalk. The John Lennon case opens. This is Memento Mori.
Won't you spare me over another?
Today we're doing a deep dive into an event that I think really tore a hole in the cultural fabric of the 20th century. We're talking about the assassination of John Winston Lennon.
And it's such a strange case to tackle because, in a legal sense, it's completely solved.
Oh, absolutely. It's solved. We know who did it. He confessed almost immediately. He was convicted. There's no mystery there. But the sources we've gone through really highlight how it continues to exist in the public imagination as this kind of popular cold case.
The cold case of motive.
Exactly. Not of fact, but of meaning. The why is so incomprehensible, so out of proportion with the act itself, that it leaves this huge vacuum, and that's what we want to explore.
Well, you can't even begin to talk about that vacuum without first establishing the sheer size of the person who left it behind. John Lennon.
It's almost impossible to overstate.
I mean, we're talking about a co-founder of the Beatles. For many, that's the beginning and end of the conversation right there.
Yeah.
The most influential band in history.
But by 1980, he was so much more than that. He had evolved. He was a global peace activist, a political voice, and just one of the most significant cultural figures of his time, a real lightning rod.
Absolutely.
His influence went far beyond music. It was in politics, in social commentary. He had this potent combination of just raw musical genius paired with this very defiant, anti-establishment political stance.
Especially around the Vietnam War.
Right, and civil rights and all these different movements. He was a true iconoclast. He loved to challenge norms, to question authority, and millions of people all over the world really looked to his voice, to his music, to his worldview.
And the timing of it all in 1980 is just so, it's a deeply cruel historical irony. This wasn't a man whose career was fate.
Not at all. It was the opposite.
He'd been gone. He took 5 years, starting in 75, to just step away and find some stability. And then he comes back with this glorious, highly anticipated return.
The Double Fantasy album, which, as the sources confirm, was a massive success, both critically and commercially. He was, by all accounts, just getting started on a whole new chapter.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. The irony is it's profound. Here's a man who had navigated the absolute chaos of his early life, Beatlemania, divorce, radical activism, and he had finally found this period of genuine peace.
He'd reemerged, creatively on fire, only to be struck down.
And that sudden, brutal end happening precisely when he was reconnecting with the world and his art, it just amplified the sense of a massive global injustice.
And the setting itself, the location, becomes a character in the story. It always does in these cases, doesn't it?
It really does.
The Dakota apartment in New York. This iconic, instantly recognizable building was supposed to be his fortress, his sanctuary.
It was the one place where he and Yoko Ono could live a life that was, at least by celebrity standards, remarkably quiet and peaceful.
The ultimate contradiction, then.
Completely. A man who had spent his entire adult life generating, just cultural chaos, living under this intense public microscope, finally retreats into this quiet, domestic life, only for that sanctuary to be violently breached right on his own doorstep.
It just shows you can't really build walls high enough when you carry that level of global fame.
The outside world will always find a way in.
Okay, let's unpack that period of calm, because I think it's absolutely essential to understanding the man he was in that final year, this 5-year hiatus from 75 to 80.
It wasn't just a break.
No, it was a complete reinvention. He deliberately stepped into a totally new identity.
It was a profoundly conscious decision. He was stepping away from the relentless pressure, the noise of the music industry. The sources all describe this transition from, global rock icon to just a dedicated parent.
It's a house husband years.
Exactly. After his son, Sean, was born, he dedicated himself completely to fatherhood and to home life. It wasn't a vacation, it was a fundamental shift in his entire way of being.
So what did that actually look like for someone like John Lennon? I mean, we hear house husband, but what did that really mean?
It was a fascinating role reversal for the time. He famously traded, studio sessions and world tours for a domestic routine, waking up, making meals.
He learned to bake bread, right? That's a detail that always comes up.
Yes, he learned to bake his own bread. He focused entirely on Sean's upbringing. He also took over the family finances, which was a huge job, managing the Beatles' legacy. He talked about finding a real sense of fulfillment in the mundane, the routine that he'd never had during the chaos of the Beatles.
It really sounds like he was trying to practice what he'd been preaching for so long, finding that inner peace and stability in a normal life.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. The world was still knocking, of course. He turned down massive offers for reunions, for new albums, for performances. He just said no.
His priority was his son.
His son and his relationship with Yoko, he called it his gardening period. He was just nurturing his family. And that time was clearly necessary for him to heal, to recalibrate, and ultimately to rediscover his own creative voice from a place of peace, not public demand.
And then 1980 comes, and he returns. And it's not a quiet comeback. It's an explosion.
A huge, confident, creative surge. Double Fantasy, his album with Yoko, was met with this massive wave of enthusiasm.
A real statement.
A huge statement. John Lennon was back. He was artistically vital and maybe happier than he had ever been. The songs he wrote for it, like Starting Over, were all about that joy he found in his family and that simplicity.
It wasn't just a successful album. It felt like a promise of more to come. The sources are really clear on this. He was already excited about the next project.
He was. He was already planning new music. There was talk of a potential world tour.
And that is the absolute core of the tragedy.
It is. He was looking forward, not back. The fans were so intensely anticipating his return to the stage. I mean, can you imagine what a moment that would have been? A moment that just never happened.
That anticipation, the potential of what was next.
Yeah.
It just multiplies the sense of loss by 1,000.
It does. He had survived the most dangerous parts of his own life. You know, the fame, the politics, the personal turmoil. He found stability, and he was on this incredible creative upswing. His death just feels so arbitrary, so cruel.
So if you're looking back on this whole arc, what does it mean? You have this global figure who finds peace and success finally, and then it's just terminated by this external violent force.
It's this brutal clash of idealism and reality. It's the beautiful message of peace and love colliding head-on with this dark, obsessive, completely selfish hatred.
It just shows how fragile it all is.
Deeply fragile. Even the biggest star in the world can't wall themselves off from malice, even when they're hiding behind the stone walls of the Dakota.
And that malice had a name. Mark David Chapman. Let's pivot now to the shadow at the gates, because his profile is unsettling from the very beginning.
Mark David Chapman, a 25-year-old from Hawaii. He traveled specifically to New York to do this, and his background, even in just the summaries, is marked by instability.
A history of failures.
A history of failed relationships, struggles with depression, just a profound sense of aimlessness. He wasn't a casual fan who snapped. He was a deeply troubled person who had built an entire psychological world around John Lennon.
So what was the fuel for that obsession? It clearly wasn't just admiration. It sounds like something much darker.
It was a deeply corrosive psychological cocktail. The sources are very clear on this. The core motivation was this intense jealousy and resentment.
Jealousy of what, specifically?
Of Lennon's success, his wealth, his fulfillment. Chapman looked at Lennon's life, the happy family, the art, the global fame, and he saw it all through the lens of his own failures, his own disappointments.
He saw Lennon's success as an indictment of his own life.
A direct, infuriating indictment of his own lack of purpose.
And that resentment then solidifies into this intellectual argument, this accusation that Lennon was a fake.
Exactly. That was the justification. Chapman became obsessed with the idea that Lennon had betrayed all the ideals he preached. You know, here's the guy singing "Imagine No Possessions"
while living in one of the most exclusive, luxurious apartment buildings in the world.
The ultimate lap of luxury in the Dakota. And Chapman saw that disparity, the activist millionaire, as an unforgivable hypocrisy.
And he felt he had to expose it.
In his delusional state, he saw himself as a moral crusader, someone who would expose this great fake. It's a chilling case of someone projecting all their own failures onto a public figure and then weaponizing that projection.
But then it gets even stranger. We move from a recognizable, if twisted, celebrity obsession into something unique, this literary element.
This is what makes the case so bizarre and disturbing. The connection to J.D. Salinger's novel, The Catcher in the Rye, it's absolutely crucial to understanding Chapman's mindset.
He didn't just like the book.
No. He identified with the main character, Holden Caulfield, so powerfully that he almost became him. And Holden, as you know, is this famously disillusioned, cynical kid who just rails against the adult world because it's full of phonies.
So this is more than just having a favorite book. This is taking a fictional character's worldview and using it as a literal justification for murder. How does that leap happen?
He saw himself as a real-life catcher in the rye. Holden Caulfield talks about wanting to save children from falling off a cliff, from falling into the phony adult world. In Chapman's warped view, he was protecting innocence by eliminating the ultimate phony.
And John Lennon was the ultimate phony.
The prime example, the biggest phony in the world. A beacon of wealth and fame who had, in Chapman's mind, sold out his anti-capitalist message. By killing Lennon, he believed he was performing this righteous act of social cleansing, inspired directly by a fictional character.
So he wasn't just committing a murder?
He was trying to give his own meaningless life meaning by playing the role of a literary vigilante. It's deeply, deeply disturbing.
And that detail, the book being his justification, it really helps explain his actions later. Why he didn't flee.
Precisely. The book gave him a narrative. It turned a pathetic grab for attention into what he saw as a coherent philosophical statement. It was his entire framework for reality. And that's why any analysis of Chapman has to go beyond simple jealousy and into this very specific, very warped psychological story he built for himself.
Let's go to the day itself, Monday, December 8th, 1980. A day that started as just a routine working day and ended as a defining moment of the decade.
It started like any other day in their new, settled life. Lennon and Ono were focused on their work. They spent the afternoon at the record plant studio working on new music, just continuing that creative momentum they had.
But the first fateful encounter happens earlier, around 5:00 p.m., as they're leaving for the studio.
Right. It's still daylight. They walk out of the Dakota to head downtown, and there's the usual small group of devoted fans waiting outside the gates.
And among them is Mark David Chapman.
He'd been waiting there for most of the day, just lurking among the genuine admirers.
Which brings us to that moment. That iconic, absolutely chilling photograph.
It's one of the most haunting images in modern history. Chapman steps forward, holding a copy of the Double Fantasy album. Lennon, who's used to this, just pauses. He takes a pen, he signs the cover, and the photograph freezes that moment forever. You see Chapman's strange, intense gaze right next to Lennon's sort of indifferent kindness, a fleeting moment between a man and his killer.
And Chapman got the autograph, he got his prize, but he didn't leave.
No, that's the terrifying part. The signature was proof, it was the souvenir, but it wasn't the goal. He stayed. He waited for nearly 6 more hours. He was completely committed to his plan. The hours that passed between that 5 p.m. autograph and their return late at night, they're just terrifyingly methodical. He had every chance to walk away, but he didn't. He just sat in the shadows, waiting, a silent, steady progression towards this awful, unnecessary tragedy.
The final moments happen at around 10:50 p.m. Lennon and Ono are coming home from the studio.
They're in a limo. And there's this small but historically noted detail. Lennon decided against going out for dinner. He wanted to go straight home.
Back to his sanctuary.
Exactly. The limo, as was common, didn't pull into the courtyard. It stopped on the street. So Lennon and Ono got out and walked the short distance toward that arched, dimly lit entrance of the Dakota.
And that moment of quiet, of transition from public street to private home, is shattered.
Violently and definitively. As they got close to the entrance, Mark David Chapman stepped out of the shadows. He didn't say a word. He just assumed a combat stance and fired 5 hollow-point bullets into John Lennon's back.
The sound must have been horrific.
Immediate and horrific. 5 shots. The sources say Lennon staggered a few steps into the lobby area of the building and then just collapsed. He dropped the cassette tapes he was carrying. Yoko Ono was right there and just started screaming for help.
It was over in seconds.
A swift, brutal, overwhelming act of violence. And the location, right at the door to his home, made the violation absolute.
And the police response was, thankfully, incredibly fast.
It was. Officers from the 20th Precinct were nearby and arrived within moments, and they made a critical decision. They saw how severe the wounds were, and they knew waiting for an ambulance would waste precious time.
Though they didn't wait.
They didn't. They lifted Lennon into the back of their patrol car and rushed him at high speed to Roosevelt Hospital. A desperate attempt to save his life.
And at the hospital, what were the efforts like?
They fought for him, intensely. The medical sources detailed this immediate all-out effort, but the internal injuries were catastrophic. Those types of bullets are designed to do maximum damage. They performed massive blood transfusions, open chest heart massage right there in the ER, trying to manually restart his heart, but the damage to his major arteries was just too severe. There was nothing they could do.
And the official confirmation came just a little after 11 p.m.
John Lennon was declared dead at 11:07 p.m. local time.
And there's an important detail here about Yoko Ono's reaction.
Yes. In that moment of unimaginable grief, she had the presence of mind to ask that the news not be announced immediately. She wanted to prevent the immediate media chaos and hysteria that she knew would descend on the hospital.
The world would find out soon enough.
It did, and the shockwaves were just truly global.
Now we have to talk about the most bizarre, the most iconic detail of the whole event. The assassin's behavior right after the shooting.
This is where his twisted literary justification just manifests in the real world. Mark David Chapman did not run.
He made no attempt to escape.
None. After firing the shots and watching Lennon collapse, he just calmly walked a few feet away, took off his coat, placed it on the ground, and sat down on the sidewalk to wait.
And what was he doing when the police arrived seconds later?
He was calmly reading The Catcher in the Rye. It's so disturbing because it shows the totality of his delusion. In his mind, the mission was complete. The phony had been eliminated, and now he was just settling into this new identity he believed he had earned. The arresting officer said he was completely docile. The book was still in his hands. It was his proof, his justification, his calling card.
And when they finally took him into custody and asked him that one huge question, why? What was his reason?
His answer was stark, simple, and horrifyingly honest. He said he did it to gain fame.
To be famous.
To be known. To steal the celebrity status of his victim.
And that creates this unbearable tension, doesn't it? The sheer scale of the loss. This icon of peace and music versus the pathetic, selfish triviality of the motive. A grab for recognition.
That tension is why this wound has never closed. If the motive had been political or personal, maybe the world could have found a way to frame it, to understand it. But the complete lack of any rational motive, it just leaves this perpetual sense of disbelief and disgust. He destroyed so much for nothing more than his own notoriety.
Let's get into the legal resolution then. There's a paradox of a solved case that just keeps generating questions.
Exactly. Legally, it's an open and shut case. The killer was caught at the scene, he confessed, he was convicted. But the mystery that endures isn't who did it. It's trying to comprehend the why.
And that why is two-sided. It's not just the fame.
No, the two parts are critically linked. First, you have the intellectual layer, his obsession with Lennon being hypocrite. He really believed he was doing a public service by exposing this corruption.
But the real driver was the fame.
The real driver was the desperate, all-consuming need to achieve fame by killing the person who embodied it. Lennon wasn't chosen randomly. He was chosen because his stature was so immense that killing him would guarantee his killer would become instantly and infamously known.
And the legal process itself was surprisingly quick.
It was. Chapman chose to plead guilty to second-degree murder. He bypassed a long, sensationalized trial, which was probably a small mercy for Yoko Ono and the public. He was convicted and sentenced to 20 years to life.
But the legal story doesn't end in 1981. It continues to this day.
That's right. For the last couple of decades, this story gets dragged back into the public eye every couple of years because of his parole hearings.
He became eligible in 2000.
Yes, and since then, he has regularly requested parole. Over a dozen times now. And each hearing is this grim cultural ritual where the details of the crime are dredged up all over again.
And every single time, he is denied. What's the specific reason the board gives for keeping him locked up after all these decades?
The rationale is very consistent, and it's powerful. The parole board always points to a few key things. First, community safety. But more importantly, they always focus on the severity and the premeditated, selfish nature of his act.
They're acknowledging this wasn't just any crime.
They are. They stress that this wasn't a crime of passion. This was a deliberately planned, narcissistic act designed purely to achieve notoriety. It's as if the board is saying the crime was so profoundly public and self-serving that it can never really be paid for.
It sounds like they're protecting the symbolic value of the victim, in a way.
I think that's a big part of it. Their decisions ensure that society continues to punish this unique symbolic debt. They repeatedly state that granting him release would deprecate the seriousness of the crime. They're essentially confirming that his quest for fame at the expense of a human life is an unpayable debt.
So now we move into what you call the unclosed wound. Even with a solved case, the sheer shock of it all, breeds these endless theories.
The loss was just too big for people to accept the small, pathetic reason behind it. That gap between the size of the event and the smallness of the motive, it creates a psychological void, and people rush to fill that void with more complex, more satisfying explanations.
And the most prominent theories, given Lennon's history, point toward the government, the CIA or the FBI.
That narrative comes directly from his history as this very outspoken, left-leaning activist, especially during the Vietnam era. The sources are clear that Lennon was under intense surveillance by the U.S. government for years.
The Nixon administration tried to have him deported.
They did. There was a multi-year effort to get him out of the country because of his political influence on young people.
So the theory goes, if they couldn't silence him politically, they silenced him permanently.
That's the core of the political assassination theory. That this wasn't a lone nut, but a planned hit by U.S. intelligence to neutralize a powerful voice. Some of the wilder claims even suggest Chapman was some kind of mind control subject, a programmed assassin.
And we have to be very clear here. There is no evidence for any of this.
Absolutely vital to state. These claims have never been substantiated. No credible evidence has ever surfaced. They exist entirely in the realm of speculation. But they show you how badly people needed a reason that was as big as the tragedy itself. It's almost easier to believe the FBI killed a political enemy than to accept that one pathetic man with a gun could erase so much talent so easily.
And then there's the other, more mystical theory, the Dakota curse.
Right. The building itself has this long, gothic, and sometimes dark history. It's been linked to all sorts of strange events. And the sources say that Lennon himself sometimes felt the building might be cursed or haunted. The fact that the murder happened right at its gate just adds this mythological, almost fated quality to the whole thing.
So you have all these elements swirling around, the solved crime, the selfish motive, the grand conspiracies, and they all contribute to this permanent cultural scar.
Lennon's death really stands as this painful, universal example of an icon of peace being destroyed by an act of selfish hatred. The event triggered this massive global wave of grief. But in a tragic way, it also cemented his legacy. It made him immortal.
The meaningless act gave his life an eternal meaning.
Precisely. The sources all synthesize this one point. The crime was solved, but the profound senselessness of it is what created this lasting shock, this emotional unsolvability for the entire world. We know what happened, but we still can't process the why.
So after this deep dive, where does that leave us? We've looked at his final peaceful years, the violent end, the chilling aftermath. What does it all mean?
I think it boils down to the ultimate tragic contrast in modern history. You have John Lennon's beautiful, universal message of peace, creativity, and love, and it's just starkly opposed by the meaningless, selfish, and desperate nature of his death.
The legal resolution didn't bring any emotional closure.
None. It just confirmed a horrifying truth about jealousy and the vulnerability of public figures. The world didn't just lose a man, it lost the entire future of what he might have created.
Which brings it all back to the parole board, doesn't it? The process is still ongoing.
And that continuous denial of his parole is society's way of acknowledging that this loss was unique. It ensures the punishment reflects the premeditated nature and the cultural devastation of the act. But it leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to consider. Society continues to punish the killer, but can we ever truly reconcile with such a pointless loss of genius? Or will the need to punish the man forever be tied to our inability to comprehend the senseless destruction he caused?
If you want to open other files that remain in the dark with us, join the investigation and support the video, because the truth is only visible to those who look at it. Thank you for listening. Until we meet again in the next dark story.